I'm just listening here.
Oh, yes. Okay. Again, good morning, everyone. I'm Godfrey St.Bernard from the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm presenting on historical and projected population dynamics of Caribbean youth populations, implications for youth population agendas. And the paper really seeks to identify the fact that young people are really the future of any given country or region. And it looks at 6 countries in the Caribbean: Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Belize, and St. Lucia. It is really predicated on the fact that population dynamics, and as a demographer, I'm really taking a demographic view of population dynamics and how they may present themselves in the future. And I'm basically saying that at the moment, Caribbean populations in general don't take these things into account. It's as if they are waiting for the invisible hand to present outcomes and react to the outcome. But the paper is really one that is seeking to promote a proactive approach and a proactive model in terms of advancing decisions for how governments, NGOs, and other elements of civil society go about advocating for different population groups in the respective countries. It also hinges upon a sociological imagination taken out of the C. Wright Mills thesis, and it is really based on drawing on evidence. It's an evidence-based approach insofar as it is bringing a scientific dimension to how we go about, charting the future of different population groups and populations overall in general. And I'm saying this because I think much of what we do in the region is more or less based on a vulgar engagement with scientific enterprise rather than a truly scientific approach that hinges upon sociological theory, demographic theory, and all the other social scientific theories that advance the way we ought to think. So the aim of the paper is really predicated upon the need for policymakers to be proactive in their desire to adequately serve the needs of youth population groups, given what I have said earlier on about young people. And it is drawing upon a sociological imagination that will reinforce the merit of this proactive approach that I'm speaking of, rather than a reactive model, right? And the end result is that it would really, out of the work, the answers that are produced by the research, they really focus specifically on the delivery of education services, healthcare delivery, labor market encounters, and how all of these collectively satisfy the needs of young people. So looking at, Caribbean populations, as I said before, it focuses on 6 countries in the Caribbean region: Barbados, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Belize, and Guyana. These are countries of variable population sizes. So today we have Jamaica at about 2.6 million persons, Trinidad and Tobago at about 1.3 million persons, Guyana at about 800,000, Belize at just under 500,000, Barbados at about 300,000, and St. Lucia at just under 200,000. So you can see that they are variable population sizes. But to speak about population sizes, not only to speak about the overall size of the population, we also have to think in terms of how the different age-determined populations will vary across time. And what we have seen looking at from 1950 to present time is declines in the relative sizes of younger populations and increases in the relative sizes of older populations. Of course, the youthful population has stayed more or less static across the period 1950. And when I say so, the relative size in terms of the percentage distribution has stayed more or less static over the period 1950 to present. But given population dynamics, it's expected to decline. Of course, the older population, especially the 65 plus, is increasing at a rapid rate. And I'm talking about this because most people romanticize the Caribbean, but really and truly, the population dynamics in the Caribbean seem to reflect, population dynamics that we see in many of the advanced countries, globally speaking. Fertility rates in Caribbean societies have been declining in all the Caribbean societies that I've alluded to, especially in Barbados. Barbados began its decline as far back as the 1960s. Many of the others began their decline like in the 70s and in the 80s. Life expectancy and mortality experience has been improving, generally speaking. People are living longer, generally speaking. And in terms of child mortality, there have been some improvements and so on. In terms of the aging populations, all the populations are aging at a rapid pace in the Caribbean, except perhaps for the Belize population, because that remains relatively younger, largely due to migration from Central American countries that neighbor Belize and so on. So to move on quickly, because I don't have much time, what I'm basically looking at is what is going to happen to these populations in these Caribbean societies in years to come. And in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, the populations of those countries, I mentioned Jamaica at about 2.6 million, Trinidad and Tobago at about 1.3 million. Those two countries, their populations will plateau sometime before 2030 and start going right back down. So Jamaica perhaps will never see 3 million people. Trinidad and Tobago will never see 1.5 million people in the history of humankind. And similar projections have been made for Barbados that will plateau soon after 2030, St. Lucia by about 2040, and Guyana will plateau by about in the 2030s as well. Belize, however, will have continuous growth. Even by 2050, that population will continue to grow. And I think, when you juxtapose that population growth with what is happening with respect to the different subpopulations predicated on age-determined outcomes, and in particular the youthful population, it throws up some very interesting insights. So we have to use foresight. In other words, again, that sociological imagination that is predictive in nature, that critical sensibility. We have to use foresight to really shape youth agendas, and in particular, I think, the priorities for youth agendas. And I'm looking specifically at, national health services and systems. That's one area that there has to be some focus. Of course, there are going to be certain threats to human capability due to fertility decline, which I'll perhaps develop in discussion if there's time to permit that. And certainly there will be some migration trends, and the next generation of Caribbean peoples will have to respond to those migration trends. And again, all of these agendas are agendas that have to be targeted specifically at young persons. And when I say young persons between 15 to 24, but to talk about persons between 15 to 24 in the future means you also have to target children and so on. So some of the agendas will be looking at children. So to close up, in keeping with the time, I think some critical issues that we have to focus on is the importance of demographic theory, mathematical modeling, and that sociological imagination, in keeping with the scientific enterprise and embracing scientific enterprise. The importance of the theory of demographic transition, and it is an important theoretical framework that guides thinking about population change across time and so on. We have to see youth as a moving target, and we need to take stock as well of cross-generational goals and objectives with different realities and perceptions, and how they will impact youth across time. Of course, I made reference to the various functional subpopulation groups and how they will be changing in relation to how those pertaining to young people and children will change. And finally, the persistence of, we have to be always concerned, and all of what I'm saying is really predicated on robust demographic projections generated by the UN, generated by myself in some instances, and my projections have been pretty much consistent with those of the UN. But all of this bearing in mind that these demographic trends are advanced in the absence of unforeseen environmental and international shocks that may turn things upside down For example, if there are earthquakes, major hurricanes, tsunamis, and those kinds of outcomes, those can affect what I'm saying. So I think, having said that, I will stop here, and thanks for the attention.